The morning sun peeked through the blinds of Amara Johnson's new apartment, casting long stripes of light across boxes that still needed unpacking. She sat at her kitchen counter, sipping coffee from the only mug she'd managed to find so far. Moving to Westfield had happened quickly, almost too quickly. But when opportunity knocked, Amara never hesitated to answer. 3 weeks ago, she had been deputy chief in Bridgeport, a mid-sized city about 2 hours away. Now at 42, she was about to become Westfield's first black female chief of police. The thought still made her stomach flutter with a mix of pride and nerves. Amara glanced at her phone. A text from her mother. "Big day tomorrow. So proud of you, baby girl," she smiled. 20 years in law enforcement, and her mother still worried about her as if she were a rookie on her first beat. She texted back, "Just getting settled. Call you tonight." Then she looked around at the chaos of her new place and sighed. The apartment was temporary, just for 6 months until she found the right house. But even temporary spaces needed to feel like home. Her fingers brushed against the framed photo she'd placed on the counter last night, the only decoration she'd put up so far. It showed a younger version of herself standing beside her father in his police uniform. He had been her inspiration, her guiding star. 8 years gone now, but she still felt him watching over her shoulder sometimes. "Well, Dad," she whispered to the photo. "I made it." The doorbell rang, startling her from her thoughts. She wasn't expecting anyone. Amara approached cautiously. Old habits die hard when you've spent your career being careful, and peered through the peephole. A woman in her late 50s with salt and pepper hair stood outside. Holding what looked like a casserole dish, Amara opened the door. "Hello there," the woman said brightly. "I'm Rose Henderson from apartment 4B. Just wanted to welcome you to the building." Amara's professional mask melted into a genuine smile. "That's very kind of you, Rose. I'm Amara Johnson. Just moved in yesterday. I figured as much. Saw the moving truck." Rose handed over the dish. "Chicken pot pie. Nothing fancy, but it'll save you cooking while you're unpacking." "Come in, please," Amara offered, stepping back. "Though I warn you, it's a bit of a disaster zone in here." Rose laughed as she entered. "Honey, I've moved 17 times in my life. This is nothing." As they chatted, Amara carefully avoided mentioning her new job. Experience had taught her that people acted differently once they knew you were in law enforcement. Sometimes they got nervous, sometimes they started asking for favors about parking tickets. She'd tell Rose eventually, but for now it was nice to just be Amara from apartment 3A. "So what brings you to our little corner of the world?" Rose asked, settling onto one of the 2 bar stools at the kitchen counter. "New job," Amara replied simply. "Starts tomorrow. Well, Westfield's a good place to live. Been here 30 years myself." Rose looked around the apartment. "You got family coming to join you?" Amara shook her head. "Just me. My mom's back in Chicago. My sister's in Atlanta with her kids. No husband? Partner?" Rose asked, then quickly added, "Not that it's any of my business." Amara chuckled. "No worries. And no, career got in the way, I guess. Or maybe I just haven't met the right person." The truth was more complicated. There had been relationships, some serious, some not. But the demands of her job, the late nights, the constant stress, they took their toll. Her last relationship had ended 2 years ago when Paul, a high school principal she'd dated for 18 months, had finally given her an ultimatum. Him or the job. She'd chosen the job and she didn't regret it. Most days, "Well, you got plenty of time," Rose said, patting her hand. "My 3rd husband was my charm and I didn't meet him until I was 50. They talked for another 20 minutes before Rose stood to leave. "I'll let you get back to your unpacking. But come by for coffee sometime. And if you need anything, directions, restaurant recommendations, whatever, I'm just upstairs." After Rose left, Amara returned to the kitchen and opened her laptop. She'd researched Westfield extensively before accepting the position. But there was always more to learn. The police department had 137 officers serving a city of just under 100,000 people. Crime rates were average for a city its size, with property crimes outpacing violent offenses. But statistics didn't tell the whole story. The department had faced criticism in recent years for a lack of diversity in its ranks, and several controversial traffic stops involving minority drivers. The previous chief had retired after the city council pushed for reforms. Amara's appointment was part of that change. She pulled up the local newspaper's website. Her appointment had made the front page 2 weeks ago. The headline read, "Historic Choice for Police Chief, as City Hires Dr. Amara Johnson." The article included a professional photo of her in her deputy chief uniform from Bridgeport and quoted the mayor calling her exactly the kind of forward-thinking leader Westfield needs. What the article didn't mention was the backlash. Amara had seen the online comments, the social media posts questioning her qualifications, suggesting she was only hired because of her race and gender. Some came from citizens. Others she suspected from officers within the department itself. She closed the laptop. She hadn't gotten this far by letting other people's opinions hold her back. The afternoon slipped away as Amara unpacked boxes, arranged furniture, and tried to create order from chaos. By evening, she'd made good progress. The kitchen was functional, her clothes were put away, and the living room looked almost lived in. As the sun began to set, she decided to take a drive around the city, her city now. She changed into jeans and a casual blouse, grabbed her purse, and headed down to the parking garage. Her dark blue sedan was one of the few personal indulgences she allowed herself. Not flashy, but comfortable and reliable. She slid behind the wheel and pulled out of the garage. Westfield sprawled before her like an open book waiting to be read. She drove through downtown first, noting the mix of historic buildings and newer developments. Restaurants were busy with Sunday evening diners. A few shops remained open, their windows lit up against the gathering dusk. She continued outward through neighborhoods that grew increasingly affluent as she headed north. Large homes with manicured lawns gave way to even larger estates set back from the road. Then she turned east, crossing an invisible line into a part of town where the houses grew smaller, the streets narrower. She slowed as she passed a playground where a few children were still playing, while adults chatted on nearby benches. This was the heart of the Oak Park neighborhood, predominantly Black and Hispanic, and one of the areas where community police relations had been strained. Tomorrow, she would arrive at headquarters in her official capacity, but tonight she was just another citizen, observing, learning, getting a feel for the rhythms of her new home. She made a mental note to meet with community leaders from Oak Park in her first week. Building trust would take time, but it had to start somewhere. As darkness fell completely, Amara headed back toward her apartment. She took a different route, wanting to see as much of the city as possible. As she turned onto Maple Street, she noticed a patrol car parked at the corner, its lights off. 2 officers sat inside, perhaps taking a break or watching for traffic violations. She drove past without slowing but glanced in her rearview mirror. Neither officer seemed to pay her any attention. Back at her apartment, Amara heated up the pot pie Rose had brought and called her mother as promised. "How's the new place?" her mother asked after they'd exchanged greetings. "Still working on it," Amara replied. "But I already met a friendly neighbor." "And the department? Have you visited yet?" "Not officially. That's tomorrow." Amara took a bite of the pot pie, which was delicious. "But I drove around the city tonight, getting a feel for it. Are you nervous?" Her mother knew her too well. "A little," Amara admitted. "It's a big step up, and I know not everyone's happy about my appointment." "Let me tell you something," her mother said, her voice taking on the tone that Amara recognized from childhood lectures. "Your father faced the same thing when he joined the force back in '75. One of only 3 Black officers in the whole department. People didn't want him there either. But he showed up every day and did the job better than anyone else." "I know, Mom. And now his daughter's going to be chief. He would have been so proud he wouldn't have been able to see straight." Amara laughed, blinking back unexpected tears. "I miss him." "Me too, baby. Every day." There was a pause before her mother continued in a lighter tone. "Now have you figured out what you're wearing tomorrow? First impressions matter." They talked for another half hour, the familiar rhythm of conversation with her mother calming Amara's nerves. By the time they hung up, she felt centered again, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. She spent the rest of the evening preparing for her first day. She laid out her uniform, not the ceremonial one with all the decorations, but the standard chief's uniform she'd wear for daily duties. She reviewed her notes on each department head and senior officer she'd be meeting, and finally she wrote down her goals for her first 100 days as chief. As she got ready for bed, Amara paused in front of the bathroom mirror. The woman who looked back at her seemed both familiar and strange, the same person she'd always been, but now carrying a different weight of responsibility. "Chief Johnson," she said quietly to her reflection, testing how the title felt in her mouth. She thought about the officers she'd seen on patrol earlier that evening. Tomorrow they would be under her command. Some would welcome her leadership. Others would resist it. Change was never easy, especially in a profession as steeped in tradition as policing. But change was coming to Westfield, whether they were ready or not. And Amara Johnson would be leading it. She turned off the bathroom light and climbed into bed. Tomorrow would arrive soon enough, and with it a new chapter in her life, and in the life of the city she was now sworn to protect and serve. The alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., though Amara had been awake for 20 minutes already, staring at the ceiling of her new bedroom. First day jitters, she thought to herself. After 20 years in law enforcement, she still got them. She went through her morning routine methodically: shower, coffee, light breakfast. She'd planned to wear her formal uniform today, but at the last minute she changed her mind. Instead, she chose her regular duty uniform with minimal decorations. She wanted to send a message. She was there to work, not just for ceremony. As she pinned her badge to her chest, Amara studied her reflection. The uniform fit perfectly, tailored to her athletic frame. The 4 stars on her collar, marking her as chief, caught the morning light. Her short, natural hair was neat and professional. She looked the part. Now she just had to play it. "You've earned this," she told her reflection firmly. "You belong here." She gathered her things, locked her apartment, and headed down to the garage. Her official swearing-in ceremony wasn't until 10 a.m. at City Hall, but Amara wanted to visit headquarters first, to walk through the building before anyone expected her. The streets were quiet at 6:45 a.m. as she drove across town. Westfield was just waking up. A few early joggers, delivery trucks making their rounds, coffee shops turning on their lights. Amara took a different route than yesterday. Wanting to see more of the city, she passed through a neighborhood where small businesses were just starting to open: a barber shop, a laundromat, a corner grocery with produce displayed outside. A mural covered one wall, showing children of different backgrounds playing together. Beneath it, someone had recently spray-painted words that made Amara slow down. "Who protects us from them?" She made a mental note of the location. Addressing that sentiment would be part of her job now. As she continued driving, Amara noticed she was being followed. A patrol car had pulled out from a side street and was now 2 car lengths behind her. She checked her speed, 5 miles under the limit. Her turn signals were working. Her out-of-state license plates were valid. Still, years of experience had taught her to be careful. She made a right turn, then another, circling back toward the main road. The patrol car followed. Amara considered her options. She could head straight to headquarters, but that might seem like she was running. She could pull over and identify herself, but that felt reactive. Instead, she decided to continue driving normally and see what happened. She didn't have to wait long. Red and blue lights flashed in her rearview mirror. The officer wanted her to pull over. Amara took a deep breath and followed procedure perfectly, signaling her intent to comply, pulling to the right-hand side of the road, keeping her hands visible on the steering wheel, turning off the engine but leaving the key in the ignition. She rolled down her window halfway. In her side mirror, she could see 2 officers emerging from the patrol car, both men. One older, perhaps in his 50s, with a stocky build and thinning gray hair. The other younger, maybe early 30s, tall and lean with a military-style haircut. Both wore standard Westfield PD uniforms and approached with hands near their weapons, not drawn, but ready. The older officer came to her window while the younger one positioned himself slightly behind her car on the passenger side, watching. "License and registration." "Ma'am," the older officer said, his tone clipped and professional. His nameplate read Officer T. Wilson. "May I ask why I'm being pulled over, Officer Wilson?" Amara asked calmly. Wilson's expression didn't change. "Your vehicle matches a description we received." "License and registration, please." Amara knew this was unlikely. Her sedan was one of the most common models on the road, but she nodded. "My purse is on the passenger seat. I'm going to reach for it slowly." "Go ahead," Wilson said, watching her movements carefully. She retrieved her license and registration, handing them over without comment. Wilson studied them for a moment, his eyebrows rising slightly at her out-of-state address. "You're a long way from home," he remarked. "I just moved here," Amara replied. Actually, sit tight, Wilson interrupted, walking back to his patrol car with her documents. Through her mirrors, Amara watched as Wilson conferred with his partner, then made a call on his radio. Standard procedure, running her plates and license. But she noticed how the younger officer kept his hand near his weapon, how he positioned himself to see inside her car, the way his eyes scanned constantly for threats. They were being exceptionally cautious for a routine traffic stop. Either they were always this vigilant, or something about her, a black woman in a nice car with out-of-state plates, had triggered extra scrutiny. 5 minutes passed before Wilson returned, his partner maintaining position. Step out of the vehicle. Please, ma'am, Wilson said. May I ask why? Amara kept her voice even. Just step out of the car, please. Amara knew her rights. This request wasn't legally justified based on a routine traffic stop. But she also knew that as a black woman being pulled over, the safest course of action was often compliance followed by addressing any violations of procedure later. All right, she said. I'm opening my door slowly. She stepped out, standing straight but non-threatening. In her uniform with 4 stars on her collar, she knew she made an unusual sight. Wilson's eyes widened as he took in her appearance. He began, then stopped. Chief Amara Johnson, she said, extending her hand. I was planning to introduce myself at headquarters this morning, but I guess this works too. Wilson's face went through a rapid series of expressions: shock, confusion, embarrassment. Behind him, the younger officer stepped forward to see what was happening, then froze when he realized who she was. Chief, Wilson managed to say, shaking her hand automatically. We didn't. The department memo said you were starting today, but you weren't expecting to find me driving around at 7 a.m., Amara finished for him. I wanted to get a feel for the city before the official welcome. Now you said my car matched a description? Wilson cleared his throat. There was a report of a similar vehicle involved in... His voice trailed off as he realized how weak the justification sounded. Amara nodded slowly. I see. She looked past him to the younger officer. And you are? Officer Reyes, ma'am, he replied, stepping forward and offering a crisp salute. Miguel Reyes. At ease, Officer Reyes, she said with a small smile. We're not in the military. Wilson seemed to recover some of his composure. Chief Johnson, I apologize for the misunderstanding. If we had known... That's exactly my point, Officer Wilson, Amara cut in, her voice firm but not angry. You didn't know who I was, and that's fine. What concerns me is whether you would have handled this stop the same way if I were someone else. Wilson's face flushed. I assure you, we follow procedure with all traffic stops. I'm glad to hear it, Amara said. She glanced at her watch. I'm heading to headquarters now. I'd like both of you to meet me in my office at 3 p.m. today. Yes, ma'am, both officers replied almost in unison. And Officer Wilson, she added as she turned back to her car, you can keep my license and registration for now. I'll collect them this afternoon. She got back into her car, aware of the officers watching her in stunned silence. As she pulled away, she caught a glimpse of them in her rearview mirror. Wilson running a hand over his face, Reyes staring after her car. Amara drove the rest of the way to police headquarters with her mind racing. That interaction told her more about her new department than any briefing could have. The officers had been professional but overly cautious. Their justification for the stop was flimsy at best. And their shock at discovering her identity revealed that while they might have known a new chief was starting, they hadn't bothered to learn what she looked like. She pulled into the parking lot of a nondescript brick building with Westfield Police Department in large letters above the entrance. A few early shift officers were arriving, giving curious glances to her out-of-state plates as they walked past her car. Amara sat for a moment, collecting her thoughts. Today would be full of introductions, handshakes, and carefully worded speeches. But she already had her first real challenge. 2 officers who would be sitting in her office at 3 p.m., probably worried about their jobs. She wouldn't fire them. That wasn't her style, and it wouldn't solve the deeper issues. But she would use this incident as a teaching moment for them and for herself. Amara stepped out of her car and walked toward the building that would be the center of her professional life for the foreseeable future. Officers held the door for her, some recognizing her from her photo in the newspaper, others simply showing courtesy to a woman in a chief's uniform. As she entered the lobby, she took a deep breath. The same air that had once circulated through buildings where her ancestors had been unwelcome, even unsafe. The same air that her father had breathed as he fought to make space for himself in a profession that had long excluded people who looked like them. Now she was here to lead, to protect, to serve, and to change what needed changing. "Good morning, Chief Johnson," said the desk sergeant, standing to greet her. "Welcome to Westfield." The morning passed in a blur of handshakes, introductions, and ceremony. By the time Amara returned to headquarters after her official swearing-in at City Hall, her cheeks hurt from smiling for photos. The mayor had introduced her to what felt like half the city, and her right hand was stiff from all the congratulatory handshakes. Now, back in her new office, Amara finally had a moment to breathe. The space was larger than she'd expected, a corner office with windows overlooking downtown Westfield. The previous chief had cleared out his personal belongings, leaving behind only the standard-issue furniture and a few departmental plaques on the walls. The empty bookshelves and bare desk made the room feel hollow, waiting to be filled with her presence. She set her hat on the desk and walked to the window, gazing out at her new city. From this height, Westfield looked peaceful. Neat streets, people going about their day, cars moving in orderly patterns. But Amara knew better than most that surface appearances could be deceiving. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called. Turning from the window, a woman in her mid-40s entered, carrying a tablet and a stack of folders. Her gray-streaked brown hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and she wore a crisp white blouse with dark slacks. "Chief Johnson, I'm Diane Fletcher, your administrative assistant," she said. "I worked with Chief Brooks for the last 8 years. Amara smiled, offering her hand. "Nice to meet you, Diane. I've heard good things." This was true. Diane's name had come up in her briefing as someone who effectively ran the administrative side of the department. Having her support would be crucial. Diane shook her hand firmly. "Welcome to Westfield, Chief. I've prepared some materials for you." She placed the folders on the desk. Department roster, current active investigations, budget summary, and the community outreach calendar. "Thank you." "I appreciate thoroughness," Diane nodded, then hesitated. "There's something else you should know. Officers Wilson and Reyes are waiting outside. They asked to see you. Said you had a meeting scheduled for 3 p.m. Amara checked her watch, 1:30 p.m. "They're early. Should I tell them to come back later?" Amara considered this. The officer's eagerness to meet ahead of schedule could mean many things: anxiety, remorse, or perhaps a desire to control the narrative of what had happened that morning. "No," she decided. "Send them in now." "And Diane?" "I'd appreciate it if you'd sit in and take notes." Diane's eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. "Of course, Chief." A few moments later, Officers Wilson and Reyes entered the office. Both had changed into fresh uniforms, their badges gleaming. Wilson's face was composed but tight around the eyes. Beside him, Reyes looked younger than he had that morning, his posture stiff with nervousness. "Officers," Amara greeted them, remaining standing. "You're early." Wilson cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am. We wanted to speak with you as soon as possible regarding this morning's incident." "Have a seat," Amara said, gesturing to the chairs in front of her desk. She sat down herself, with Diane taking a chair in the corner, tablet ready. Wilson and Reyes exchanged a quick glance before sitting. Wilson spoke first. "Chief Johnson, I want to formally apologize for this morning." "We had no idea." Amara held up a hand, stopping him. "Before we get to apologies, I'd like to understand exactly what happened." "Officer Reyes, since Officer Wilson did most of the talking this morning, I'd like to hear your perspective first." Reyes straightened in his chair, clearly surprised to be addressed directly. "Yes, ma'am. We were on routine patrol in Sector 4 when we observed your vehicle. You made several turns in succession, which can sometimes indicate someone trying to avoid police contact." "I was exploring the neighborhood," Amara said evenly, "learning my way around." "Yes, ma'am. We realize that now." Reyes swallowed visibly. "We decided to run your plates, and when the system showed they were out of state, Officer Wilson thought we should investigate further." "And why was that?" Wilson jumped in. "Chief, with all due respect, out-of-state vehicles sometimes indicate drug trafficking or other criminal activity, especially in that neighborhood." "The neighborhood with the mural of children playing?" Amara asked, her voice still calm but carrying an edge now. The one with small businesses opening for the day? Is that a high-crime area in Westfield? Wilson shifted uncomfortably. It's had its issues, ma'am. I see. Amara leaned forward slightly. And when you approached my vehicle, what did you observe? Reyes spoke up again. A well-dressed woman alone in the vehicle, hands visible on the steering wheel. He paused. Nothing suspicious. Yet Officer Wilson asked me to step out of the vehicle. Why? The two officers exchanged another look. Wilson's jaw tightened. Standard procedure when we're uncertain about a situation, he said. Amara nodded slowly. I've been in law enforcement for 20 years, Officer Wilson. I know when something is standard procedure and when it's not. Asking a driver to exit their vehicle during a routine traffic stop, when they've presented no threat and there's no visible contraband, is not standard procedure. She let her words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. What I experienced this morning wasn't unique. It happens to people who look like me every day in cities across this country. The difference is I'm now your chief. Wilson's face had reddened slightly. Chief Johnson, if you're suggesting this was racially motivated, I'm not suggesting anything, Amara interrupted firmly. I'm asking you both to reflect on why you made the decisions you made this morning. We all have biases, conscious and unconscious. The question is whether we recognize them and work to overcome them. She turned to Diane. Ms. Fletcher, could you pull up the department's data on traffic stops for the past year? Break it down by driver demographics, reason for stop, and outcome. Diane nodded, her fingers moving quickly across her tablet. After a moment, she turned the screen so they could all see it. The numbers told a clear story. Black and Hispanic drivers in Westfield were 3 times more likely to be pulled over than white drivers, and twice as likely to be asked to exit their vehicles. Yet the rate of finding contraband or evidence of other crimes was actually lower for these stops. Amara let the officers study the data for a moment before speaking again. This isn't about you personally. Officers, this is about patterns and practices that have developed over time, patterns I intend to change. Reyes looked genuinely troubled by the data. Wilson's expression was harder to read, somewhere between defensive and resigned. What happens now? Wilson asked finally. Are we being disciplined? Amara leaned back in her chair. No, at least not in the way you're thinking. She stood up and walked to the window again, gathering her thoughts. When she turned back, her decision was made. Officer Wilson, you've been with the department for... How long? 23 years, ma'am. And you, Officer Reyes? 4 years, Chief, Amara nodded. Starting next week, both of you will join a new community engagement unit I'm creating. You'll spend half your shifts walking beats in neighborhoods throughout the city, including the one where you stopped me this morning. No patrol car, just you on foot meeting the people you serve. Wilson's expression darkened. Chief, with all due respect, that sounds like a demotion. It's not a punishment, Officer Wilson. It's an opportunity. Amara's voice was firm but not unkind. You've been policing these streets for over 2 decades. You know this city, but I'm wondering how well you know its people, all of its people. She turned to Reyes. And you, Officer Reyes, you're still early in your career. This is a chance to develop skills that will serve you for years to come. Reyes nodded slowly. I understand, Chief. Wilson was silent for a long moment, his internal struggle visible on his face. Finally, he gave a short nod. Yes, ma'am. Good. Amara reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small notebook. One more thing. I want each of you to keep a daily journal of your experiences. Who you meet, what you learn, the questions people ask you, the concerns they share. We'll meet weekly to discuss your observations. She handed them each a notebook, then reached for a third object in the drawer, Wilson's copy of her license and registration from that morning. I believe these are mine, she said, setting them on her desk. Wilson flushed. Yes, Chief, sorry about that. Amara studied both officers. She could see uncertainty in their eyes, maybe even a touch of resentment. That was natural. Change was never comfortable. But beneath that, she sensed something else. A glimmer of understanding, perhaps even respect. That will be all for now, officers, she said. Diane will email you the details of your new assignment. As they stood to leave, Amara added, And gentlemen, thank you for coming early today. Initiative is a quality I value highly. After they left, Diane remained, her expression thoughtful. That was not what I expected, she admitted. What did you expect? Amara asked, curious. Most chiefs would have either let it go completely or come down on them like a ton of bricks. Your approach is different, Amara smiled slightly. Different can be good, Diane. Yes, Chief? Diane hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, I think you handled that perfectly. We'll see, Amara said, looking toward the door where the officers had exited. The real test will be what happens next. 2 weeks into her new role, Amara sat in a small coffee shop called Morning Brew, located in the heart of the Oak Park neighborhood. She'd made it a habit to spend at least one morning a week working outside the office in different parts of the city. Today, she'd chosen this spot deliberately. It was just a block from where she'd been pulled over. The coffee shop was busy with morning customers. Some glanced curiously at Amara in her uniform, but most were too focused on their own routines to pay much attention. She liked that, being present without being the center of attention, observing the natural rhythm of the neighborhood. The door chimed, and Officer Reyes walked in, looking slightly out of place in his uniform. He spotted Amara and made his way to her table. "Good morning, Chief," he said, standing at attention. "Have a seat, officer," Amara replied, gesturing to the chair across from her. "And maybe get yourself some coffee." "This isn't a formal meeting." Reyes nodded and went to the counter. Amara watched as he chatted briefly with the barista, a young woman with colorful braids who seemed surprised but not uncomfortable talking to a police officer. A good sign. When he returned with his coffee, Reyes seemed more relaxed. "Thanks for meeting me here, Chief. I know you're busy." "I make time for officers who want to talk," Amara said, "especially when they request a meeting outside of headquarters." "What's on your mind?" Reyes set his notebook, the one she'd given him, on the table. "It's about the community engagement assignment." "Having second thoughts?" Amara asked. "No, ma'am. Actually, the opposite." He opened the notebook, revealing pages filled with neat handwriting. "I've been keeping the journal like you asked, and I've realized some things I wanted to discuss with you." Amara felt a small spark of hope. "Go on." "The first few days were uncomfortable," Reyes admitted. "People weren't used to seeing an officer walking around just talking to folks. Some were suspicious. Others ignored me completely." "And how did that make you feel?" Reyes considered the question seriously. "Frustrated at first. I joined the force to help people, you know. But it felt like they'd already decided I wasn't on their side." Amara nodded. "That's a common experience for new officers in neighborhoods that have had negative interactions with police." "But then something changed," Reyes continued. "There's this basketball court on Elm Street. Kids play there after school. I started stopping by, just watching the games. One day their ball went into the street. I grabbed it before a car could hit it, tossed it back. One of the kids, a boy about 12, he thanked me." Reyes smiled at the memory. "The next day he asked if I wanted to play. I said yes, and we shot some hoops. Nothing serious. But the day after that, more kids wanted to join in. Building trust," Amara observed. "One small interaction at a time." "Exactly." Reyes took a sip of his coffee. "Now when I walk that beat, people say hello. The owner of the corner store offers me a bottle of water when it's hot. Yesterday, an elderly woman asked me to help her carry groceries to her apartment. And how is Officer Wilson adjusting?" Reyes's expression grew more guarded. "He's trying, I think. It's harder for him. 23 years of policing one way, it's not easy to change." "No, it's not," Amara agreed, "but not impossible." "That's actually why I wanted to talk to you," Reyes said, leaning forward slightly. "I had an idea. The department's youth basketball league starts next month, right? I was thinking Officer Wilson and I could coach a team. Get some of the kids from Elm Street involved." Amara raised her eyebrows, pleasantly surprised. "That's an excellent idea, Officer Reyes. Have you mentioned it to Wilson?" "Not yet. I wanted to run it by you first." "I think it could be perfect for him," Amara said. "Wilson was a basketball star in high school, did you know that? There's a trophy with his name on it in the display case at headquarters." Reyes looked surprised. "No, I didn't know that. People are more than their uniforms," Amara said softly. "That's true for us, and it's true for the communities we serve." They talked for another half hour, going through Reyes's notebook. His observations were thoughtful, showing a growing understanding of the neighborhood's dynamics. Before he left, Amara gave him permission to approach Wilson about the basketball team and promised department support for the initiative. As Reyes headed out, Amara noticed a woman at a nearby table watching them. After a moment, the woman stood and approached. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you the new police chief?" "Amara Johnson?" "I am," Amara replied with a smile. "And you are?" "Teresa Washington. I own the bookstore across the street." She gestured toward a storefront with a colorful display of children's books in the window. "I overheard some of your conversation. Hope you don't mind." "Not at all," Amara said. "Would you like to join me?" Teresa sat down, studying Amara with curious eyes. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone who'd stay behind a desk, make speeches about community policing without ever actually coming into the community." Teresa shrugged. "The last chief visited this neighborhood exactly twice in 5 years. Both times with a news crew." Amara nodded. "I believe in being present, in listening more than talking. That young officer, Reyes, he's been a surprise too. First week, people were betting how long before he gave up and went back to driving around in his patrol car, but he stuck with it." "And Officer Wilson?" Amara asked. Teresa's expression grew more reserved. "That one's tougher to read. He does his job, walks his beat. But there's a wall there. Walls can come down," Amara said. "With time and the right approach. Maybe." Teresa didn't sound convinced. "Listen, the reason I came over, we're having a neighborhood council meeting tonight at the community center. Normally we don't invite police, but would you come? Just to listen?" Amara didn't hesitate. "I'd be honored." "What time?" 7 o'clock. It might get heated. People have concerns they've been waiting to express for a long time." "I understand. I'll be there." After Teresa left, Amara finished her coffee, thinking about the evening ahead. This was exactly the kind of direct engagement she'd been hoping for, though she knew it wouldn't be easy. Years of distrust couldn't be erased overnight. The community center was a one-story brick building that had clearly seen better days. Paint peeled from the window frames, and one of the front steps was cracked down the middle. Despite these signs of neglect, the main room inside was clean and well organized, with chairs arranged in a circle and a table of refreshments against one wall. Amara arrived 15 minutes early. Dressed not in her uniform but in slacks and a blouse. She wanted to be recognized as the chief but not have the uniform become a barrier to honest conversation. Teresa greeted her at the door. "Wasn't sure you'd really come." "I said I would," Amara replied simply. "Well, fair warning. Not everyone was thrilled when I mentioned you'd be joining us." As people began to arrive, Amara could feel their surprise at seeing her there. Some nodded politely. Others kept their distance, watching her with wary eyes. By 7 o'clock, about 30 people had gathered, a diverse group in age, gender and background, though most were Black or Hispanic, reflecting the neighborhood's demographics. Teresa called the meeting to order and introduced Amara briefly before opening the floor for discussion. The first few speakers were cautious, raising relatively minor concerns: streetlights that needed repair, noise complaints, questions about permit processes. Then a man in his 60s stood up. He leaned on a cane and his face bore the weathered look of someone who had seen hard times. "My name is Howard Jenkins," he said, his voice strong despite his frail appearance. "I've lived in this neighborhood for 47 years, raised 3 children here, and in all that time I've never felt protected by the police." "Watched, yes. Suspected, yes. But protected? No." He looked directly at Amara. 2 months ago, my grandson was stopped 3 blocks from here, 17 years old, walking home from his after-school job. Officers made him lie face down on the sidewalk because he matched a description. Held him there for 20 minutes while people walked by, watching. You know what that does to a young man's spirit? The room had gone completely silent. Amara met his gaze steadily. "No, sir, I don't know exactly what that feels like, but I'd like to understand better if you're willing to tell me." Her response seemed to surprise him. Perhaps he'd expected defensiveness or empty promises. It makes him feel like no matter what he does, good grades, staying out of trouble, working hard, none of it matters. Because all some people will ever see is a threat. Howard's words hung in the air. Amara nodded slowly. "Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Jenkins. Would you be willing to tell me which officers were involved?" "Why? So they can deny it happened that way?" "No," Amara said firmly. "So I can address it directly. So your grandson can receive a formal apology, and so those officers can be assigned to community engagement duties like Officers Wilson and Reyes." A murmur went through the room. Someone near the back called out, "Wilson?" The one who's been walking around here looking like he swallowed something sour. There was a ripple of knowing laughter. Clearly Wilson's reluctance had been noticed. "The very same," Amara acknowledged with a small smile. "Change isn't always comfortable, but it is possible." For the next 2 hours, Amara mostly listened as residents shared their experiences, concerns, and occasionally their hopes. Some stories were painful to hear, instances of disrespect, excessive force, or simply being ignored when help was needed. Others offered tentative appreciation for recent changes they'd noticed, more foot patrols, officers stopping to talk rather than just driving by. When the meeting finally wound down, Amara stood to address the group. "Thank you all for your honesty tonight. I can't fix 20 years of problems in 2 weeks. But I can promise you this, I'm listening. I'm learning, and I'm committed to doing better, not just personally, but as a department." She took a breath before continuing. "Next month, we're starting a youth basketball league coached by officers, including Officer Reyes and Officer Wilson. We'd welcome participation from the young people in this neighborhood." As the meeting broke up, several people approached Amara individually, some to share more concerns, others simply to get a closer look at the woman who might actually change things. Howard Jenkins was the last to speak with her. "You surprised me tonight, Chief Johnson," he said. "How so?" "You didn't make excuses. Didn't get defensive. Just listened." He leaned on his cane, studying her face. "My grandson, his name is Devin, smart kid. Wants to be an engineer. This thing that happened, it shook him." Amara nodded. "I'd like to meet him if that's all right with you and with him." "I'll ask him," Howard said. "Can't promise he'll say yes. I understand. All I'm asking for is a chance." As Amara walked to her car later that night, she felt both drained and energized. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but for the first time since arriving in Westfield, she felt like real change might be possible. 3 months had passed since Amara's first day as chief of police. The early autumn air carried a hint of coolness as she walked through Patterson Park, where the department's youth basketball tournament was in full swing. 4 makeshift courts had been set up, with games happening simultaneously. Colorful team shirts dotted the park, and the sounds of bouncing balls, cheering parents, and laughing children filled the air. Amara stopped at the edge of Court 3, where Officer Wilson was coaching a team in bright orange shirts. His face was flushed with excitement as he called out encouragement to a lanky boy attempting a free throw. "Good form, Devin. Just like we practiced." Devin Jenkins, Howard's grandson, took a deep breath, bent his knees slightly, and released the ball in a perfect arc. It swished through the net without touching the rim. Wilson pumped his fist. "That's what I'm talking about." The rest of Devin's team rushed to high-five him as they took the lead. Amara smiled, remembering the day Devin had reluctantly shown up for the first practice, standing apart from the other kids, arms crossed defensively. Howard had convinced him to give it a chance, but no one had expected the connection that formed between Devin and Wilson. It turned out they shared more than a love of basketball. Wilson's son was studying engineering in college, the same path Devin hoped to follow. That shared dream had opened a door to conversations that went far beyond the court. Quite a change, isn't it? Amara turned to find Diane standing beside her, holding 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Amara. "In Wilson or in the community?" Amara asked, accepting the coffee with thanks. "Both," Diane replied. 3 months ago, I wouldn't have believed this was possible." They watched as Wilson's team huddled during a timeout, their faces intent as he sketched a play on his clipboard. Beside him, Officer Reyes added something that made the kids nod with determination. "It wasn't easy," Amara said, thinking of the difficult conversations, the resistance from some officers, the skepticism from community members. "Still isn't." "The best things usually aren't," Diane observed. They moved to Court 1, where a team of younger children was playing. Among the spectators, Amara spotted Teresa Washington from the bookstore, cheering on a small girl who dribbled with fierce concentration. "Chief Johnson!" Teresa waved her over. "Come meet my granddaughter, Zoe. She's the point guard." Amara joined Teresa on the sidelines. "Which one is she?" "Number 7, the one with the determined scowl." Amara laughed as she spotted the tiny girl dribbling through defenders twice her size, her face set in intense focus. "She's fearless." "Gets that from her grandmother," Teresa said with pride. "Listen, I've been meaning to thank you. That community meeting 3 months ago, It actually led to something. People noticed. "We still have a long way to go," Amara cautioned. "Of course we do, but at least we're moving in the right direction now." Teresa nodded toward a group of officers mingling with parents and children. They're starting to feel like part of the community, not just visitors who show up when there's trouble. As the tournament continued, Amara made her way around all 4 courts, stopping to chat with officers, parents, and children. She knew most of them by name now, a point of pride for her. This wasn't just policy implementation, it was relationship building. Near the refreshment table, she found Howard Jenkins sitting in a folding chair, watching his grandson's game from a distance. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. Howard gestured to the empty chair beside him. Free country. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the game. Then Howard spoke, his voice thoughtful. "When Devin told me he wanted to join the police basketball league, I thought he was crazy. After what happened to him, why would he want anything to do with cops?" Howard shook his head. "But he said something that stuck with me. He said, 'Grandpa, if we don't give them a chance to be different, how will they ever change?'" Amara felt a swell of admiration for the young man. Wise beyond his years. "Gets that from his grandfather," Howard said with a small smile. "That Officer Wilson, he's not what I expected. First few practices he was stiff, awkward, but he knows basketball and he treats the kids with respect. Devin says he's been helping him with college application essays too." "Wilson's changed," Amara agreed. "But so has the community's willingness to see him differently." Howard nodded slowly. "Takes both sides, doesn't it?" Before Amara could respond, a commotion erupted at Court 2. She stood quickly, scanning for the source of the disturbance. A man was shouting at one of the referees, gesturing angrily. "That's Ray Thompson," Howard explained quietly. "His temper gets the better of him sometimes." Amara watched as Officer Reyes approached the situation, moving calmly but purposefully. Instead of immediately confronting Thompson, he positioned himself nearby and waited for a natural pause in the argument. When Thompson finally took a breath, Reyes spoke to him quietly. Amara couldn't hear the words, but she saw Thompson's shoulders gradually relax. After a moment, the 2 men walked a few steps away from the court, still talking. The game resumed. "A few months ago, that would have gone very differently," Diane commented, having returned to Amara's side. "How so?" "Officers would have rushed in, hands on their weapons. Thompson would have felt threatened. Things would have escalated." Diane shook her head. "I've seen it happen dozens of times," Amara nodded. "De-escalation is a skill just like any other. It takes practice." By late afternoon, the tournament had reached its final games. Wilson's team, the Orange Thunder as they called themselves, made it to the championship match against a team coached by 2 other officers. The stands were packed as the teams took the court. Amara found herself holding her breath during the final minutes of the game. The score was tied and Devin had the ball. Wilson called out a play from the sidelines, but the defense was tight. As the seconds ticked down, Devin made a split-second decision, passing to a teammate who was wide open instead of taking the shot himself. The teammate, a girl named Tanya who had been quiet all day, looked startled to find the ball in her hands. But she squared her shoulders just as Wilson had taught them, and released a perfect shot that swished through the net as the buzzer sounded. The Orange Thunder erupted in cheers, rushing the court to lift Tanya onto their shoulders. Wilson was beaming, giving high fives to everyone within reach. Even Howard was on his feet, clapping and whistling for his grandson's team. Later, as the trophies were handed out and photos taken, Amara stood slightly apart, watching it all with a sense of quiet satisfaction. This tournament was more than just a community outreach event. It was a visible symbol of the changes taking place in Westfield. Changes that were sometimes uncomfortable, occasionally messy, but undeniably meaningful. "Penny for your thoughts, Chief?" Amara turned to find Wilson beside her, his championship trophy tucked under one arm. "Just reflecting on how far we've come," she said honestly. Wilson nodded, his expression growing serious. "I owe you an apology, Chief. When you first assigned me to community engagement, I thought it was a punishment. I was angry." "I know," Amara said simply. "But you were right." Wilson looked out at the courts where his team was still celebrating. "I'd forgotten why I became a cop in the first place. Somewhere along the way, I started seeing threats instead of people. And now I see Devin who,